Hello and welcome to SeekHealing's Seeker Stories. I'm Alison Reeves, the Outreach Coordinator for SeekHealing. And today with me is Alison, who is a wonderful participant in SeekHealing. She lives in San Francisco. She has an adorable little Chihuahua who might be in and out of the picture here. She's a dedicated attendee of our online connection practice meetings and has been space owling for us and is in training now to become a facilitator. And she graciously accepted the offer to tell a bit of her story to us all. So if you're new to these seeker stories or new to SeekHealing in general, SeekHealing is a nonprofit that is based in Western North Carolina. I know where we live. And we, we focus on social health as a means to support people in healing from all kinds of things, including addiction, mental health challenges, physical health challenges, or just general feelings of loneliness and isolation, which I think we all struggle with. And especially in these COVID times. Right now, we're recording in February of 2021, and it's been about a year of social distancing and isolating in our homes and that sort of thing. So yeah, so we host at SeekHealing, we host meetings and other events that help us to genuinely connect with each other and get really real and take the masks off and talk about what's hard and listen with love and care and compassion to one another. So on that note, if you are somebody who might get triggered or really emotionally activated by topics like addiction or abuse or anything that's kind of the harder parts of life. If you're prone to get triggered by those things, maybe don't listen to this interview because we go there. We talk about these kinds of things. And we also understand that sometimes that's not what people need to hear to heal. So if it is, please stick with us. And if not, much love and blessings. And I think that's it. I think that's the whole intro. So we thought we would start this interview by modeling the SeekHealing style of check-ins, what we call check-ins, which is really just reporting to one another, like where we're authentically or how we are authentically feeling in this moment, what's alive for us, what's up for us, what's real. So I'll go first, which feels a little awkward, like an awkward transition. Obviously I'm feeling maybe not obviously, I don't know, I'm feeling a little giddy, a little laughy. And I think that's partially nervousness, but also partially like really genuinely joyful to be doing this with you, Alison, because I really enjoy our conversations and excited for what, this is gonna be, I think. No pressure, of course. And I mean, other than that, in life in general, I already told you before we hit record, but life is going really good. So I'm feeling very happy and grateful and aligned, I think, with my life. So how are you?
Thank you for asking. I actually feel really kind of like heartwarmed by some of the things that you just said, especially when you mentioned like being here with me, because I kind of feel the same way. I'm like, my Ansel's awesome. I'm like so happy that we're doing this, and we've never actually talked, like I think just the two of us, so I'm actually pretty excited. I am also a little bit nervous. I'm feeling like a little bit of tension in my chest and a little bit of tension right here in my shoulders. But it's like nervousness and excitement, which is kind of like the flip side of nervousness. So it's still nervous, but it's like a good nervous. That's how I'm coming into this right now.
Beautiful. I sometimes like to say nervous-sighted. I'm nervous-sighted.
They're recited.
Yeah.
That's nice. I like it.
Mhm. Cool, thanks. So yeah, I don't really like have a clear idea of where the entry point is, but I think if you just want to share, like, how about where you started with SeekHealing, like how you started, what about it works for you and resonates for you and all that stuff, and then maybe we can after that get into backstory stuff, further
Yeah.
backstory.
Sure. So I have a sister who lives in South Carolina, and she's an MSW. And she had, I think, just researching like different types of therapy in the area, because she actually does clinical work with her MSW. She found SeekHealing, and she told me about it. And there was like a kind of like a weekend festival that was happening online.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was back in April or May through SeekHealing. And I did that. That was my first exposure. And I really was kind of blown away, honestly. Blown away, also super intimidated. So I experienced some connection practices through that, but I have social anxiety, and was medicated for that for a few years, and have kind of cleverly figured out as an adult how to hide it while also avoiding a lot of social situations. And these connection practices at first were very intimidating for me. So as much as I really loved it and appreciated it, there was still a fear for me to kind of come back. But then later on, I went to the SeekHealing website, and I can't remember when this was. It was much later on, like maybe in the fall. And SeekHealing, I started doing like online connection practices. And I was like, oh, that looks good. And I saw a Saturday one. I was like, that's perfect for me. So I did the Saturday connection practice, and man, I was just absolutely blown away. And the first connection practice I did on Saturday, it was very small. I think there was 3 of us. It was the facilitator, the space Al, and me. And through that, I think I felt a little more comfortable, but also I think because of that, I felt a little more comfortable to be open. And I got the interactions that I had in that were just really meaningful. I mean, people were listening to me. They seemed caring to me. They seemed genuinely curious about me with no like other agenda. Sharing impact. They shared impact with me, which is one of my favorite things that I've learned through SeekHealing. And I also felt the same way about them. And I remembered, I got to do this like every Saturday. That's my thought. I was like, I'm going to do this every Saturday. And I kept going, and it was growing because it's a Zoom platform, right? And it was new. So it was growing, and we ended up getting more people. And then I almost feel like I just got so much out of it that I started doing other connection practices. Because as we've been going through COVID, SeekHealing has been growing too, and they've been doing more and more online things. And so now I've been doing a lot of the online practices, and it's kind of amazing. So not only has it grown, but it's also people from different parts of the country, or sometimes not even in the country, like from other countries. And I just think it's so incredible that you can be in a Zoom room with a bunch of strangers and have such a meaningful interaction with everyone in the room. I think that just, I mean, to this day, like still just, it still shocks me sometimes. That probably sounds like it doesn't make sense, but it's just so surprising sometimes that you can meet someone from a different country, different culture, completely different background, different everything. But when you really start talking about the things that are important to you or the challenges that you're having, you have so much more in common with people than you realize, that you give yourself or the other person credit for. And I think that's been immensely helpful for me in many ways. Like, I think especially with my social anxiety disorder, I'm just so grateful I found SeekHealing. Also, I did have substance abuse issues, and I am in recovery. So I think this is a great community for that as well. But I also just think it's a great community for human beings, just whoever you are, like whoever you are, whatever you got going on. I'm just so grateful.
Thanks, Allison. I love hearing that. Yeah, I really resonate with the surprise factor. Like, I've been facilitating for a while, but I still consistently, I'm like, I just still get blown away with how beautiful it is when people drop the masks and get really real in like this heart-centered place. Yeah, it's pretty magical, pretty healing. So would you be willing to say more about like what your journey with addiction and recovery and all that has been?
Yeah, sure. So that kind of started, I was a little old when I started doing drugs. I was 16. And the first drug I ever did was cocaine. And I just loved it so much. I loved it too much, right? I was 16 and I didn't really know. I'd had like a traumatic past and I felt like I just needed something. And I think part of it was because I had severe social anxiety. Like I got made fun of all the time during school and people would call me the mute. And when I kind of started hanging out with this person who seemed to really accept me, and they did a lot of drugs. And they introduced me to their friends who did a lot of drugs. And when I started doing drugs, I realized it kind of got rid of my social anxiety. So when I started doing coke, I didn't have that problem not nearly as badly anymore. I was like very talkative and I very much wanted to meet people and connect with people, right? So that was kind of the start. I also ended up doing meth for a while. I did heroin, I did morphine, I did angel dust, like pretty much any hard drug you can think of. I did crack. And this is like one of the lowest points. I actually snorted crack. Like I got a crack rock, I crushed it up and snorted it. And that was actually a really scary experience because I had a physical thing that happened when I did that. That really freaked me out. I also had an experience on coke where I was really having trouble breathing for a while. And I was at a party with all of my I'm going to call them my friends because I felt like they were my friends. I had never been able to be social before. But when this was happening at this party, I remember just sitting there like struggling to breathe and realizing nobody there was going to help me. Make sure as shit we're not going to call 911. That was not going to happen with this crowd of people. That was one of the first wake-up calls I got, but unfortunately it did not wake me up from using substances. And I did continue to use after that. I'm from South Carolina. I moved away to Boston 2 days after I turned 18. I got a scholarship to Boston University and just could not stop drugs. So I was still like finding coke there. I was getting heroin there. And I got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I have to stop. So I stopped and then I ended up getting pills and I would just crush up the pills and snort them. Because I thought, well, it's better than, hard drugs, right? Like I would justify it in my mind. So I was like, I can just crush up some Adderall and snort it all day, every day. That's fine. It's so much better than what I was doing. But it wasn't really fine. I was finding ways to justify it. But also I think I was doing it because I realized I just could not function at a level that I thought was like normal. I always felt like very much an outcast, even in early childhood. And so I just thought, this is the only thing that helps me. This is kind of like the only thing that makes me feel better. So I continue to do that off and on through my 20s into my 30s. And I would go through periods where I'd be like, no, I'm just going to smoke pot. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to smoke weed. But then I would veer back to like pills or occasionally like hard drugs again, like coke or meth. And it was kind of just this back and forth for years where I knew I wanted to quit. I didn't want to be doing them. I knew that they changed my personality. I knew that I did really bad things sometimes when I was either on drugs or I really needed drugs. I did a lot of bad things. However, I found it almost like impossible. Or no, I did find it impossible to quit. I just didn't think I could do it. I didn't think it was an option for me. And a couple of years ago, I went to a psychologist because I work with people that have cognitive issues and cognitive impairment or brain injuries. And I was always sober when I went to work. That was never an issue, but I was still like doing stuff on weekends or like after work. And I just thought, I just can't keep doing this. I just cannot. I also ended up getting compassion fatigue, which is something that is a hazard of a job like that. I had a lot of grieving family members that I would talk to during the day. That was a big part of my job, actually, because a lot of our clients are really sick. And some of our clients are actually in the last stages of their life. And I had to talk to a lot of grieving family members. And it got to the point where I felt like I didn't feel like I was even me anymore. Like they would be sitting there telling me things like, I'm so upset. My loved one is doing this or that, or I know my loved one is going to die. I feel like I can't get help. I think they had a stroke, like whatever it was. And there were times where I just felt like I would be sitting there and in my mind, I'd be thinking, yeah, I know she's struggling. I got a meeting at 1 I got to prepare for. I really hope she stops talking soon. That is compassion fatigue. That is not me. And when that started happening, I was like, no, I need help. Unequivocally, I need help. And so that kind of started my journey to recovery.
Wow. That's so, that's like a unique, in my experience, which is limited, that's a pretty unique window into deciding to get help. Like the fact that you weren't able to be as present and loving for other people was the thing that caused you to finally want to like really go for recovery, it sounds like.
Yeah, I find it's much easier to care and have compassion for others than it is for yourself.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think I really gave a shit about myself, but I did care about other people, and I loved my job, and I really wanted to help these people, and I didn't feel like I was able to do it in the way that I wanted to. So that was the trigger.
Wow. And so did you also feel like there was a direct correlation between drug use and the compassion fatigue and not being able to show up the way you wanted to?
I think it was years of drug use, and years of just unhappiness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, I did use drugs. I did feel like they helped me sometimes, but a lot of times they didn't. And that's kind of the weird thing about when you're using, like sometimes it's really fun. I'm not gonna lie, drugs can be really fun, but a lot of times they're not, especially when you're addicted. A lot of times they are not. But you keep going to that because you think you have to, because that's what you need. And it's just ingrained in you. And there'd be times where I think, I don't even want this, but I have to do it. And that might sound strange to some people, but there are absolutely many, many times where I was like, I actually don't want to do it, but I have to do it. I need to do it.
Well, that's the definition of a habit, right? It's like, yeah. I don't even know why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it's a habit, right?
Yeah. And any habit, I think, is hard to break, but especially habits that you've had for years and years or decades.
Yeah.
The longer you've had a habit, I think the harder it is to break. In my case anyway, I think because I had been doing drugs since I was 16. So this is a decades old habit that I was trying to break. And yeah.
So what was the first step for you when you decided I'm going to shift this?
So I went to my general physician, and I asked to be put on an antidepressant again. And she gave me a questionnaire to fill out. She said, when anyone requests that, you have to fill out this questionnaire. And one of the questions was, have you thought about killing yourself or committing suicide or just not wanting to be alive in the past 30 days? That was one of the questions. I said yes. And so when my physician saw that, she said, I think I want to refer you to like psychiatric. And I said, okay, I'm open to that too. And so I went there, and for the first time in my life, I call it coming out of the closet. Like, I came out of the closet. I had never told a doctor or anyone else in my entire life, never told anyone that I had any kind of addiction issues. And I was really good at hiding it. I got really good at hiding it. Sometimes I wonder, I think people that have never gone through it, they don't understand how good we can be about hiding things. We can be really good about hiding things. But I talked to a psychiatric nurse on the phone. She recommended me for a program called Intensive Outpatient Treatment. And I did that. And part of that was talking with different therapists. And that's when I came out of the closet about my addiction issues. And that's when they referred me to, they have harm reduction groups there. And so I went to those in person during that time. However, that was only 2 weeks. And at the end of that, I couldn't keep going to the harm reduction groups they had because I couldn't get out of work for it, long, on a continual basis. So, but yeah, that was the start of my, that was definitely the first seed of my recovery, I would say, in terms of confronting and dealing with my addiction.
Wow. That's super powerful in the way of what a perfect prime example of vulnerability and taking the masks off being so integral to healing and recovery in particular. And so brave, did it feel hard when you came out of the closet and talked about it for the first time?
It was awful to me. I had so much shame. Yeah, I can't even describe how hard it was. I was grateful for the harm reduction groups because it was the first time in my life where I've heard anyone else really talk about their struggles with addiction and be very open about it. And I felt more comfortable. And then also losing that after the 2 weeks was really hard because I really wanted to continue, but I couldn't get the time off work. So that kind of started my journey into okay, what are other ways I can try to, help myself and try to and just improve, get better, change these habits, care more about myself. Yeah.
What are some other things that have worked for you since then? Or been a part of your...
So I started meditation, I would say mindfulness meditation, because there are many different forms of meditation that was introduced to me at IOP, and they encouraged it a lot. And so I tried it for a while and thought it was horrible and torturous. And I literally could not keep focused for even a second. They do just an in breath, out breath. I couldn't even keep my focus for an entire in and out breath. My mind was just going and going and going. And I practiced quite a lot. Yes, I did. For me, mindfulness practice took at least 6 months before I really noticed a difference, to be honest. But the fact that I even stuck with it for that long was an indication of how desperate I was. I never used to try at anything really. I never saw the future. I kind of only saw like next week or two. And I think this is the first time where I was actually like thinking about my future, and I kept consistently trying at something. And I did start noticing differences with the mindfulness practices, but it took a long time.
Do you think you stuck with it because you really had faith that like this is gonna be fruitful eventually?
There's some promising science behind it. And I thought I have to do something. Like I just thought I got to that point when I had the compassion fatigue and I was actually being, in my mind, cold to other people who were suffering. It was like something in me snapped. And I just thought, no matter what, I have to keep trying. Like I just have to keep trying. If this doesn't work, try something else. That doesn't work, try something else. Like I just cannot live this way anymore.
Beautiful. That's amazing. I mean, that's like, man, to me, I mean, in my codependence from recovery, I think that was for me also the like, I think of that part in The Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is on the bridge with the Balrog and he's like, "You shall not pass." To me, it felt like an inner doing that to myself. Like I shall not do this anymore. I will do whatever it takes to do so, have healthier habits and healthier patterns. And it's so worth it, right? Like it's so uncomfortable at first and it's so hard, but it's so worth it.
So when you were having those thoughts, were you actually like picturing Gandalf and like the whole visual with his voice?
Not really. I think it's more just the metaphor I use for myself now. Like, oh yeah, like when I think about how I made that decision, it feels like that, feels
Oh my
like
God,
fiction.
that's so funny. I actually do have a movie where there's a character that says something and I actually hear his voice when I like really want to do something I'm scared of. It's from Ratatouille. Linguini and Ratatouille, when he's like going into work for the first time with his rat friend Remy and he's like figuring out how to hide him, and he like looks down his pants and he's like, oh. But he finally hides him. He goes, "Let's do this thing." And sometimes like when I'm really scared to do something, I'm like reminded of that, like how scared he was and how silly the thing was. But he's like, "Let's do this thing." And I'm like, yeah, let's do this fucking thing.
Oh yeah. I think it's so helpful to have those touch points, right? Like, yeah, I could go on and on. That's a whole tangent about how movies can inspire us, and other people's stories, and just like that felt visceral experience, right? Of let's do the damn thing. Like, and we can like feel it and embody it. And
yeah, absolutely.
well, I'm like just so okay, I'm going to share impact on a few things. First, so fucking grateful that you are you and you made the choices that you made, and like I get to know you now, and I'm so excited to get to know you better. And like I feel like you're this incredibly bright light that is bringing so much beauty to the world, just through being who you are. And now that you are, I feel like you're starting to realize who you are and what your gifts are and what your shininess is. And that's a gift to everybody around you, because you get to, be that even more. And it's so like the gift that you gave yourself, right? I guess it's exactly what you set out to do in your recovery. Like you gave yourself the gift of doing things differently and dedicating yourself to doing things differently. And now you get to be the love and care for other people that you wanted to do. So good job. You succeeded.
Thank you. It's honestly like really nice to hear someone say that, which sounds super vain, but
No,
it is. It
vain.
really is. It really is. Yeah, I just feel kind of soft and touched by what you just said. I really appreciate the support and the encouragement. I really do.
You're so welcome. So welcome. Yeah, and I know we talked about potentially getting into, I'm like trying to feel out where do we want to go next. And I wonder if we want to talk about like childhood trauma stuff, because one of the things that we talk about in SeekHealing a lot is that when we're in an addiction, it's literally trying to self-medicate some kind of pain from trauma that we experienced, often from the youngest ages. And to whatever extent, if you feel like you want to share, like what, and you don't have to go into detail, but like what was the pain that you were trying to, I mean, you mentioned the social anxiety, and like that's so huge, right? So feeling super like you couldn't even connect with people unless you were on drugs, that really makes sense to me. Like I remember when I was 13 and I started drinking alcohol and smoking pot, that was like 100% the reason. It was like, oh, I finally have confidence. I finally can like enjoy myself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say it started as kind of as early as I can remember. I had a very mean parent. And I had another parent that I cared for very much, but who was often very distant and I think kind of in denial. My mom was abusive and she would hit me, not all the time. It wasn't like a daily or even a weekly thing. It was kind of an every once in a while thing where she would slap me, she would punch me, she would punch me in the back of the head, but it wasn't like every day or every week. It was, I never knew. I think that's part of the fears. I never knew what was going to come. But she was verbally extremely abusive. And one of my earliest memories is when I was like 5 or 6. And she had told me to pick up my toys in my room and I hadn't done that. And she came at me and she slapped me across the face. And she said, "You are a little pile of shit. I hate you. You are worthless." And that is literally one of my earliest memories. And I mean, it kind of went like that off and on growing up. It's not like she told me I was worthless every day, but it was like every day you just learn, right? You have to learn how to adapt. So as I got older, I would learn how to not piss her off.
Right.
There
And
were definitely times, sorry, go ahead.
Just hearing that once can do so much damage, you know, to a young, impressionable child.
Yeah. So I learned kind of how to walk on eggshells around her, but even then it wasn't always enough. She was very unpredictable. That was the thing with her. She would just go off at nothing. Remember one time when I was like, this is the last time she ever hit me. I would have been 11 or 12. And I spilled something on the floor in the kitchen and she was there. So of course I'm like going to clean it up. I get a sponge, I'm like scrubbing the floor. And she asked me, "Did you wash your hands before you started cleaning that?" And I said, "No." And then I was on all fours. She punched me in the back of the head. And then she called me a filthy pig. And I had to stand up, wash my hands, and then continue scrubbing. And after that, I just kind of, I just thought at some point I'm going to be her size and the tables are going to fucking turn was my attitude. And that happened later on. And there was a night, I want to say I was a freshman in high school, where my mom was like upset with me about something. And I went and got a knife from the kitchen. And I sat like in the living room where she was, and I just sat there like laughing, like holding this knife. And at one point I was like, "Keep going." And I stood up and I was like, "Keep going." And I actually felt at the time that I would have stabbed her. Like if she had kept going and pushing me, I felt like there was that much anger and hatred in me that I would have stabbed her.
I totally understand that. Like I 100% get that. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and when I think about treating her that way that you just described, I just don't know. Obviously, your mom had a lot of trauma that she was coming from, you know, to be able to act like that or treat you like that. And like when you're a child, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much, you know, we can now as adults, I think, understand like, oh, intergenerational trauma. She probably had tons of trauma in her childhood. She was passing it on, which is like kind of helpful cognitively, right? But when you're in it and you're a child, like shit, that stuff is horrific. I mean, it's, and I want to say too, if you don't, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but something you've told me before is that like your IQ is really high and you're a really intelligent person. And I can only imagine like what, I don't want to like say this in a way that is, I don't know, an inverted insult or something, but the fact that you were like so and are so intelligent and like shining so much light now, I just can't imagine like where you would have been able to go without that abuse, you know, like how different your 20s would have been, how different your and but it's all perfect, you know. I mean, on the other side of all the pain and the trauma and the terrible things, like it's like, well, you are who you are now, and it's so beautiful. So yeah, anyway, that was kind of a word vomit. I don't know, how does that land for you?
I felt a deep resonance when you said that. I can't even tell you how many times I've thought about that. Or even, so I'm a very creative person, and I had actually wanted to be a dancer. And I wanted to do more gymnastics. I was into gymnastics and dance. They didn't want to, well, first of all, they didn't want to pay for like, you know, dance classes and stuff like that, or gymnastics classes, but also they didn't want to have to drive me back and forth. And there were a few times when my mom was driving me that were just awful. So I do wonder if I had had like really supportive parents, what would have been. I remember I think it was my junior year in high school, I got the highest score in the state of South Carolina on the verbal portion of the standardized test. And my dad wasn't even impressed. He was like, I know you're really smart. You just have to try harder.
How about you support me? How about we try that?
Well, he didn't give compliments. He just wasn't a person that gave compliments. He used to ask me why I was such a freak and why I couldn't fit in. When I went through puberty and I got a little bigger, he would call me a heifer. And he did love me. But I don't think he understood how to be supportive. And also, I think he was really put off by my complete lack of desire to do anything academically. He just did not understand that at all. And it's funny, I've talked to my oldest sister, and she said she felt all this pressure to perform well in school. I felt zero pressure. I didn't even think they noticed my grades or anything. And then my daddy later said, well, you're the smartest of all the kids. Like, I just expected you to make straight A's, which I did. But he's like, I just expected that. And I'm like, okay. But why were you so hard on me then? Like, I didn't really understand it. But I think maybe it was the way he was raised. Maybe he wasn't, given praise. He was just given criticism. And the same with my mom, like you had mentioned, when you're a kid, you have no idea that they went through trauma. You don't think that way. You just think this person that I am stuck with every day is evil. Yeah. That's how I saw my mom, honestly. When I was a kid, I thought she was evil. Now 100%, I have, changed my perspective, and I feel a lot of compassion for her. I don't know what happened to her growing up. But she was clearly a very unhappy woman, and I think she was sick. I think she just never got the help that she needed. Well, yeah, when you're a kid, or even when you're even coming off of that abuse, it can be hard to kind of distance yourself and look at it that way.
Oh, for sure.
Just because there's so much pain, right? So it's taken me a long time to kind of feel that compassion for my mom, but I absolutely do now.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, that's a PhD level kind of compassion. I feel like, when we can really have compassion, and eventually, I think forgiveness, maybe, hopefully, for the people who've harmed us the most. It's like, yeah, not easy to get there, for sure. Shows a lot of inner fortitude and inner work.
Yeah, it's taken decades.
Mhm, mhm.
but it's here. And I'm actually very grateful that I feel that way. And yeah, I kind of, you always wish you could do things over.
Mm.
Um, I wish she could do things over.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she would have wanted to do things over. I'm sure she would have, like,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. When we know better, then we want to do better, right? But sometimes it is what it is, and we got to keep moving.
Yeah.
So where are you now with your, I mean, healing is like a lifelong journey, right? It's not like stamp of done, you are healed, right? Like we never get there. That's not actually a thing that happens. But yeah, like where are you in general now?
So it's taken me a long time to come to terms with that, actually, that, I thought if I really try hard, right, and I take psychiatric medication, and I, really push myself, I join groups, I join 12 steps, I, you know, do all these things, I will become mentally healthy. I will have mental health. And what I've realized is that, I've been on this journey now for like 2 years, and it's just never going to stop. There are always challenges, and there are always instincts.
Mhm.
And it's weird. It's really weird to me. So I used to smoke cigarettes for years. And I can't remember what was happening the other night. It was like 2 weeks ago, but I saw someone like on a Zoom or something smoking a cigarette. And I was like, oh, I need to get a cigarette. Oh, wait, what? I stopped
Mm.
smoking years ago. Like, what am I doing? But it was like this strong instinct. Oh, let me get my cigarette. And so, like, when you have these really long addictions, I'm not gonna lie, like, there are definitely times where I was like, shit, I wish I had some fucking meth. Like, shit, I need, you have those days, you have those moments. I think one of the important things for me to remember that it is a moment. It's not your
Mm.
whole day. It is moment to moment, right? And practicing mindfulness has really helped me with that.
Mhm.
Especially in like realizing like this is a craving.
Mhm.
This shit sucks. It fucking sucks. And it feels like you're gonna die. Like you just have to have that thing. But it doesn't last forever. The problem is for me, a lot of people say cravings come and they go and you're good. For me, my craving comes and it goes, and then it comes back, and then it
Mhm.
comes back, and then it comes back. And I'll have days like that where it just keeps coming back. And those are really hard days. Those are really hard days. But I also feel like connection practices have really helped me with that.
Mm.
There's absolutely a sense of like isolation, I think, when you're having those cravings.
Yeah.
There's something that you want to get from it.
Mhm.
And sometimes when I do the connection practices, I feel like I don't know how to put it. Like obviously it's not like doing meth, like I'm not gonna have the same effects, but it just really helps me write it out. Just
Mm.
talking to other people, even if I'm not talking about that,
Mm.
just like really being able to be myself, as you referred to, like taking the mask off,
Mhm.
just really being able to take the mask off. And even if I'm having a craving, just being like, yeah, I really want to do some fucking coke right now. Like I'm like fucking going, oh, I'm going crazy. You know what I mean? And like being able to just say that to somebody else and know that it's safe, like it's confidential. We do the agreements to set the container. So it's confidential. They're not going to try to fix me. They're not going to try to give me advice. They're just there to listen to me and ask me questions and tell me what is resonating with them.
Mhm.
It's kind of like magical, honestly. It's just it's been really important, I think, in my recovery.
I love hearing that. I'm so happy for you for that. And it's like super true for me too. Like in my recovery from codependency is my thing, my main thing that I struggle with. And so for me, the cravings show up like, it's funny, but like craving to like go on a dating site and like compulsively look for a relationship is one way, or like compulsively wanting to call that ex who I know is really not good for me, or, you know, and then like all the grief and sorrow and shame and stuff that comes up around that. I've just consistently found within the SeekHealing community and even some friends outside of it, if I have that like person that I really trust, who I can call and I can cry and I can just like be heard, and that's to me the quickest way to, even if not like totally move through the craving or the experience, it alleviates something, right? Like it makes it manageable, and then I maybe won't do the thing.
Yeah, just being able to share something that, you know, for years I just kept all of this to myself. I felt so ashamed. Just being able to share that with someone and just be completely upfront and honest about it. There is something that happens when you have a friend who will just listen to you, and they're not going to try to fix you, and they're not going to say you're broken.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just to be there to support you and listen to you, there, it really is pretty incredible. I didn't mention my other addictions. I have had other addictions, and one of them was I would stay in relationships that I knew were unhealthy because I didn't think I could go without sex. And I'm not one of those people that can like just sleep with random people or do one night stands. So I felt like that my only option really was to stay in relationships, even though they were unhealthy. And in that regard, during COVID, I've had a lot of like thoughts about like, let me just call my ex. My ex is gonna be in town next weekend. Maybe I could just, yeah. And SeekHealing has been very important in that recovery too.
Congratulations to both of us, because that's one of the hardest ones to break, because it's so like deep in the desire to connect, right? And like and feel pleasure in our bodies and like the most primal, like animalistic things, and even transcendent things. I feel like connection is a transcendent experience quite often when I'm really connecting with someone. It's like a spiritual connection thing that's being fed in me. So anyway, yeah, it's just so and to me it strikes of the remedy for these times, right, is like we're so isolated, we're in our little boxes of our houses or these little boxes of our lives, and we've lost the beauty of being in like the village, right? Like having a big community, like lots of people who can really hold us and care for us and meet our needs. And we've lost that so much. So finding communities where we can start to rebuild that depth of real trust and love and connection is just so important. I could soapbox about that all day.
Yeah, and just accepting each other as we are.
Yep.
Not as we should be or think we should be, or other people should be, like, or other people think we should be, like just being in a community where you just accept people as they are.
It's such a like subtle thing, right? That's so powerful. It's such a powerful, powerful distinction between like it's an important, I believe it's really important in mental health field to have that like, okay, you're here to heal. So I'm the therapist and I'm going to help you heal. And right, like that's important. And then, but I really think we also need the social health aspect of, and I get to show up in places where I don't have to be working on myself, or I don't have to be like trying to get somewhere. I can just show up and be accepted exactly like you're saying, like it's easy and it's natural, and it doesn't have to, I don't have to like show up in any particular way, which I think there can be sometimes in therapy situations where it's like there's some kind of pressure sometimes to show up a certain way or to, anyway. Is that true in your experience at all?
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking like when you have a therapist, I'm sure they don't ever intend for this to happen, but sometimes as the patient, you might feel like, well, I totally fucked up. And like, we talked about this thing last time, I wanted to work on it and I didn't. Like, I don't even want to tell them that. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like for me anyway, that's happened before. Whereas with the connection practices at SeekHealing, you're actually encouraged to talk about how you fucked up or how you failed, or, just be real. Like, that's the whole point, is just to just be real and just be you.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty impressive to me for a group, or it's not therapy, but just a group situation, to have that be like the main thing, is just show up as you.
Mm-hmm.
Just be honest about what's going on with yourself as much as you feel comfortable to. I think the other thing is, so a lot of people who have like a history of substance abuse or other addictions, like outside of the substance world, like gambling, sex, shopping, whatever the addiction is, they're very used to hiding that and feeling like they can't tell people because they're ashamed of it. I feel like the same thing happens when you're a survivor of abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, verbal, whether you're a child or an adult. A lot of us, when we're abused, it's just like, we just have to hide that. We know we have to hide it from people. And so doing these connection practices where we're actually, it's like a safe space to talk about that. Talk about any of those things, your addictions, your abuse, like just whatever's happened to you. There's just something really freeing and liberating about that.
Totally. It's kind of like, I've said this several times to people. It's, for me, it's like finding water in the desert. It's like, I've been walking in the desert so long, like dealing with this feeling of complete aloneness and dryness and not getting my needs met for so long. And then I find the oasis of like, oh my gosh, people who I can really say the things and they'll accept me. And, and I remember when I was like, still like in the budding stage of trying to find that in Asheville, when I first moved to Asheville, and I had some experiences like that in Colorado where I used to live, and then moving here and like trying to find the people who I could do that with. And I was with my son was in preschool at the time, and I was with the other preschool moms, and their dad and I were breaking up, and I tried to say something about how I was going through a hard time. And I remember it was like total throwing a rat in the punch bowl. Like all the other moms just got totally quiet. And it was like the most awkward feeling in the world. And so having the people that, are consensually wanting to get real with you is pretty wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that rat. That's a really good analogy, the rat in the punch bowl. I have definitely felt, the few times I've tried to be more real with people, it's been the rat in the punch bowl situation, which kind of taught me to never even try anymore, just based on those experiences. Like, no, this is something that I do have to keep secret. Like, I thought I could try to share it, but I can't. I have to keep it secret. Or I can only talk to other addicts or, other people in the same situations about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry you went through that. It's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible feeling.
Yeah, it is. But on the other side, like, it's good to know that there are ways, I think, to feel out now. Like, now I've learned, like, there's ways to like drop a little thing and see how they react. You know what I mean? Like, get a little bit real and see how it's, it's like adding the marbles to the marble jar or whatever, one at a time. So anyway, but getting to drop into a SeekHealing space where it's like, oh, all the marbles are welcome here. That's nice. I don't have to hold back and see.
You've got really good analogies. I like it. Yeah.
The marble jar I got from Brene Brown. I can't take credit for that one.
The marble one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I don't fault you. I still think it's great. I think also when you're trying to, because I also have learned how to like maybe drop a marble or two. But even then, that's definitely something we should try to do more. I truly believe this. Like, we should try to slip in more realness into conversations outside of SeekHealing, but there's also stress that goes with that. There's also stress that goes with dropping a marble at a time.
Yeah.
You're like, how is it going to land? Totally. What's going to happen? Whereas in connection practices, even times where I do kind of think, oh my God, they might judge me. Are they going to judge me? Because it's like super vulnerable. I've just never had that experience where people are like, you're horrible, or that's crazy, or you're stupid, or, you know, I've never had that experience. It's like, we're all there to be open. You know, we're all there to listen to each other because we're all real people. We've all done shitty shit.
Yeah.
We've all done good shit. We've done lots of things. Like we're just there to listen to each other and to help each other.
It's like getting permission to be a full 360-degree human, right? Not just this like one version that we think we need to present to be accepted, or
Exactly. Show up however you want to show up, you know?
Yeah.
You're having a good day and you're showing up like, hey, blah. Or maybe you're having a shit day and you're like, man, my fucking day sucks. Let me tell you about it. It's like, however you want to show up is how you show up. And that's what's encouraged. That's the difference. You're encouraged to just be you, no matter what that means or what that entails. And I'm so grateful for SeekHealing for that. I really am.
Me too. Me too. 100%. And it keeps healing me, you know, I'll say, as like somebody who's in program management or whatever. I feel like sometimes people think those of us in like the management or whatever positions running the logistical part of SeekHealing, it seems like sometimes people think, oh, they've like, you know, arrived at some place with the authenticity and or something. Not everybody, you know, thinks that, but I've noticed that sometimes. And I love to kind of blow that out of the water and be like, actually, let me tell you all the things that I'm still struggling with. And it never fails that a connection practice, whether I'm facilitating or not, will, you know, unlock something that needed to be unlocked. And yeah, and sometimes it's like we said, surprising.
That's a really good point too about the facilitators. Because when we do connection practices, like facilitators are right there with us. That's I think that's another piece that's important to bring up. Like the facilitators get vulnerable too. And a facilitator might share something very, very real. They might cry. They might talk about some really serious stuff that's going on with them, or they might talk about past trauma. They're right in there with everyone else in the group. Like it feels very equal. Like we're all just there to support each other and listen. And facilitators can actually be very open as well. And I think that's another big difference especially between like that and therapy or even therapy groups. Because there's usually in the groups, therapy groups, there's like a facilitator that is kind of off on their own, right? And they're just kind of like overseeing or redirecting conversations sometimes. But at SeekHealing, it's like the facilitators are 100% part of the group. And they will get really vulnerable with you too. And that it makes a huge difference, I think.
That's great to hear. I love getting that feedback, you know, because that's definitely what we're going for, like what the non-hierarchical thing is supposed to look like as much as possible. So thank you for sharing that.
I think it makes everyone more comfortable. Hierarchy can be really tricky. Like socially, especially if you want to get vulnerable, hierarchy is just, that is such a barrier in some ways to getting vulnerable. So knowing that the facilitator is right there with you, there's a comfort in that. There's a sense of, you know, whatever that barriers that hierarchy puts in place kind of gets removed. And it just makes, I feel like it just makes everyone feel more accepted and more okay to really get vulnerable when you know that even the facilitator is going to give you the same thing back.
Yeah, I love that. And honestly, that's also one of the like crazy coolest things about working for SeekHealing is that like Jennifer is my boss, right? As the executive director, I can show up with her 100% authentically, you know, on any given meeting or whatever is going on. And it's welcome, you know, and that's really, you know, unique in my experience that there's like this hierarchy of power in a way because of, you know, structural things, but it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like there's going to be any punishment for me to show up exactly how I am. And that freedom also not only like makes working amazing, right? Because I don't have to put on the mask to go to work, but I think also gives me a lot more freedom and creativity, to do my job the best way that I feel like empowered to do it. And with that trust, and yeah, anyway, I could go riff on that. What it's reminding me of is that you are in training to be a facilitator now, which is so exciting. And I wonder, we're almost at an hour, but I wonder if you just want to share any intentions about going forward as a facilitator or just in general in life. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I really love that SeekHealing, like what you were just saying, they model their message even with like the way employees interact. Is kind of what you were just saying. Like, it's not like they do connection practices where there's no hierarchy and you can just be you, but then within management, that's not the case. Like, it's still the case within management. You can just show up as you are. I really believe in that as just such a powerful tool. I think for me, for my facilitator practice, I would really like I would like two things. Part of it's very selfish. For me, it's just getting more practice with trying to show up as authentically as I can and getting more comfortable with that, and getting more comfortable with other people around me showing up very authentically as well. And being accepting of that. But the other part is the city I live in, there's a lot of tragedy in the city in San Francisco. There's a huge homeless population. There are a lot of people that are addicted to various things. There are, like any other city, we have, people that are incarcerated or parolees. I feel like these are populations that are often looked down on by other people.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. I think that is, I'm not going to go into a moral thing, but I think just even for society, that's not the way to look at it, because it's not helping them. So even if you're somebody who looks down on them, treating them like they're less than is not helping them.
Totally.
Not helping them get any better. I also just feel like there's just this very strong drive in me to help these people, because I feel like they haven't gotten a lot of help. I kind of feel like that's, for a lot of them, why they're in that situation in the first place, whether it's homelessness or incarceration. Something's gone on, right? There's been trauma, there's been mental illness, there's just been not help given or received. Mm-hmm. And society looks down on them. And that's just 100% like not fucking okay. And if I can try to take the Seek practices to San Francisco, and particularly to those populations, I just really want people that feel like they are looked down on to understand that they are just as important as anyone else. And I feel like these practices are very equalizing. When we've been talking about the non-hierarchy, like these practices really help you, even if you have shame, even if you have guilt or whatever.
Yeah.
Depression, whatever it is, they help you feel heard and understood. And everyone should feel that way. Everyone should have the chance to feel that way. So that's the non-selfish part of why I want to do the facilitator training, is to try to reach out to these populations, because I really think it's just so important. And we don't have anything like SeekHealing in San Francisco. So
beautiful. Oh, I'm so excited for you to do that. I'm so like, I can just, I have big visions for where that could go. And I'm so excited you're going to be the one making that happen. I really see that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have big visions too.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, but I really have, I have some visions for the future here.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I think we're at like wrap up time. Any final thoughts or words or anything?
I guess I would just like to say that I have tried, I was put on medication at 7 years old for a couple of years for depression. I was later put on medication as a teen. I did therapy. I did therapy when I was 7 too. I've done therapy and medication kind of off and on throughout my life. And I actually feel like there was always something that it just wasn't as helpful as it could have been. And I kind of realized there was something missing. And I feel like with Seek, with finding these kind of connections, even if they were strangers, it just gives you something that is missing from just traditional therapy and from medication. It's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about SeekHealing and their message. And one of the reasons that I want to bring this to San Francisco. I feel like this is a need that has not really been addressed in our society and culture, this need for actual genuine connection. And I'm just so happy to be a part of this and to move forward with the training. And I'm so happy that we've gotten to talk because we never actually talked like one-on-one like this. And I'm also just very grateful for that. It's really interesting to hear your opinions and your perspective. And I'm just feeling very grateful right now.
Yay. Me too. Yeah, super grateful. And I would like to hang out with you on Zoom more.
Me too.
Sweet. All right. Well, to anybody watching, which always feels kind of awkward, transition the people watching, thank you for watching. And please feel free to leave comments. Go to our website, seekhealing.org, to find out how to attend these connection practice meetings. And hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Alison. It's been fabulous.
Yes.
Fabulous.
Fabulous, darling. See you soon.
Okay. Bye.